Hello and welcome to the show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today's episode is a fun role reversal. We've got a dear friend who's also a client. She's also in my mastermind group, Marjorie Alexander. She and I met in a podcasting group and have been friends for several years. Her show is called A Sustainable Mind. And for a long time, we've tried to kind of connect the dots on how we can be on each other's shows. And I had this download, this intuitive hit the other day of emotional sustainability, because she's talking about environmental sustainability, but part of what affects our environment, obviously, is us. And so I just wanted to share the episode that is going to be airing on her podcast today as well. And we titled it Emotional Sustainability. So please check out Marjorie's show, A Sustainable Mind. You can also go to asustainablemind.com and learn more about her and her show and her offerings. And I hope you enjoyed today's show.
JJ Flazanes is an empowerment strategist, the host of several podcasts, including the People's Choice Award nominee, Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. She is the director of Invisible Fitness, a best-selling author of Fit to Love, How to Get Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit to Attract the Love of Your Life, and the Invisible Fitness Formula, 5 Secrets to Releasing Weight and End Body Shame. And who cares about bios? JJ is a great friend of mine. We've been friends for, I feel like it's going on 5 years now. We actually met at a podcast accountability group, JJ. So I am so excited to be having you on the show. I think probably 4 years ago, we've been trying to figure out a way to, be on each other's shows. And I'm definitely resistant sometimes to having certain people on my show that I feel like, how does this tie into environmental sustainability? But we finally figured it out, or at least I finally figured it out. So JJ, welcome to A Sustainable Mind.
Thank you, Marjorie. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad we could finally get the connection.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off like we start off every interview, and that is tell us about how nature, the environment, and sustainability played a role in your childhood growing up.
I grew up in Pennsylvania on an acre of land where my father gardened. We grew corn and carrots, and we had peppers and onions and lettuce and rhubarb and green and snap peas, and we had trees, apple trees, peach trees. We grew mint, we grew basil and herbs. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she cooked it. And I grew up playing outside using one of those slides where you put water on. I forget what it's called. Slip and slide. The slip and slide, because I didn't have a pool, but my neighbor had a pool. I spent a lot of time in the dirt, a lot of time running around in the grass, picking pumpkins, sometimes gardening, sometimes climbing trees. Definitely climbed trees. We had a walnut tree and a chestnut tree, and boy, those are prickly. And then raking leaves. I raked leaves as I grew up. So I really grew up having that sort of environment of being outside a lot. And then, of course, when the snow would come, we would go sledding or sled riding. We had one of those old-fashioned toboggan whatever they're called, toboggan sleds. We'd also go to the high school up the street and take the discs and slide down the hill and that. So I was out in the snow. We'd make snowmen. We'd have snowball fights. So I didn't grow up in a city. I grew up in the rural part of Pennsylvania and then there were cows and horses in the backyard. Our property lines up against a farm, and the farm wasn't booming all the time, but it'd have animals most of the time. And there'd be times we'd climb through the fence on the other side. And I never cow tipped, but we talked about cow tipping. I'd never do it. It's mean. But, but when you're young, you're like, oh, we're going to go check cow tipping. And I, again, didn't do it, but I'd climb in there with the cows and with the horses. And I'd feed the horses the apples that would fall from the trees. I felt like somebody should eat them. We'd feed them to the cows too. So that's, I just grew up in this idea that you're kind of one with the earth and that you're outside, and we take vacations at the beach and just play in the sand all day. And it was your job to be outside. That's what you do.
That's amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea that you grew up in a more rural environment. I guess it's not something that we've actually talked about ever. I've never asked you about it, but that's fascinating. I had no idea. Thank you for sharing. So what I want to talk to you about today is emotional sustainability. And what I've learned over the last several years is that the work that we do out in the world is absolutely a reflection of who we are inside. And the more that I dive into self-care and getting to know myself better, overcoming the challenges and the traumas of my past helps me be a better activist. It helps me have more important conversations with people out in the world. It just helps me be a better person, a better human being, a better steward of this planet. So you're an empowerment strategist, but you really have a lot to say about emotional sustainability. So where do we start, JJ? Let's dive into this.
Well, thinking about sustainability and thinking about some of the people that I hang out with and that I work in a medical clinic with, and how we're looking at health from the idea of sustainability, from gardening and cooking your own food and making your own food and growing your own food, or buying organic, buying local, not having food waste. Same thing with looking at how we treat our bodies in terms of exercise or earthing, using ground therapy to help heal our ailments like inflammation in the body and arthritis. So thinking about, like, where does that all kind of root from, or where do we become activists from when we believe in a cause and we want to make a difference? In my experience with law of attraction, which is a lot of what I teach, it's there are always going to be someone on one side in a step one experience. And a step one experience is where there's contrast, where there's a problem, where there's negative emotion. Step two, if you do any kind of law of attraction work or have a higher power would take care of step two, which is to kind of create what it is that you want to have happen. Step three is where we want to get into alignment with what we want so we can help manifest it, so we can help bring it about. And when I look at like the crossover between the idea of sustainability, I think it's a really powerful emotional tool too, because I do a lot of coaching with people on empowerment. And empowerment simply just means you have power. And all too often, I find in the work I've been doing over the last 20 years as a personal trainer and a life coach, and now as an empowerment strategist, whether it be in a relationship or someone who has depression or anxiety, or is unhappy in their physical body because maybe they want to be healthier, they want to lose weight. There's an idea of victim mentality. When we come at something with an idea that we don't have any control over something,
Mhm.
that feels bad, always. I don't know any situation where it's not going to feel bad in the case of where you want something and you think you can't have it. It's this lack of, it's like this perception, like this lack of mentality where we want something that we perceive we can't have. Therefore, we don't have any power.
Mhm.
And so emotional sustainability is really bringing the power back to ourselves and understanding that. And that's a lot of the teachings of law of attraction, understanding that you have the power all the time, that you're the creator of your own reality, that you can manifest anything that you want as long as you're in alignment with it. The only thing stopping you is you. And while, yes, there is contrast happening all around us and things that we don't like and things that we don't approve of, so to speak, when we put our attention there, we often create more of that because we're in alignment with that. So bringing it back home to like internally and figuring out our own emotions, I believe that one of the reasons why we have an epidemic of suicides and hate crimes and depression and anxiety is because no one's taught to be sustainable in their own emotional space, to
Mhm.
understand how to process emotion, to understand how to think about emotion, to be an observer, to know the difference of being a victim versus being a persecutor or a rescuer. Having a connection between our spiritual beliefs and the way that we show up in the world. Do I believe that we live once, and do I act from a place of scarcity? Or do I believe we recycle and that the world and the universe will be here long after I'm gone, and that I've been here before and that I'm coming back again, because energy doesn't get created nor destroyed, it just gets recycled. So, again, it's partly a spiritual belief, but it's partly a physics when it comes to law of attraction. But when it comes to our emotions, I think that we're at a time where we're in such chaos on so many levels, and we're
Absolutely.
wanting to blame somebody, or wanting to tell them it's their fault, that they need to change. But that feels terrible because we have this growing fear that if we don't get them to change, that it won't change. And I think, again, that's coming from a victim mentality, which proves over and over again that we don't make the greatest impact at that level. We make the greatest impact by coming from a place of belief and of knowing and of searching for evidence of what it is we want to see to keep that momentum going and to create more of it.
So I want to touch back on this victim mentality, but you mentioned two other words there. One was rescuer, and one was prosecutor. Was that the third word?
Persecutor,
Persecutor.
there's
Okay.
a well-known body of work called either Cartman's victim triangle, or I think it's called the victim triangle.
Okay, I
Anyway, and
think you're right. Yeah.
the three parts of the triangle are victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And the point of the work, and I've done several shows on it on my show, is to understand that when you're on the triangle, which all of us are every day at some point, some people live there and never get off.
Hmm.
We want to create an awareness to understand when we're feeling victimized. And we all have a starting gate position that we enter in through our family of origin. So in your family, there's usually someone who's the rescuer. So if you, Marjorie, you'd be the rescuer. Um, if you
Yes.
didn't already know that, right?
Yes, I
Okay,
know.
within your mother and father. But at the same time, no matter where you start, we always cycle around,
Hmm.
because the rescuer at some point in time feels victimized because they feel like they have no power, no control, because they're trying to rescue.
Yeah.
And at some point becomes the persecutor because they want to blame the person who's not doing the things that make them better or let them off the hook. Right? So like we go around the triangle all the time, but having an awareness about it can help you to understand the things you need to heal within yourself, to look at where you have a lack of trust in the process of the world or of your belief systems, of your spiritual beliefs. And it's a good thing to also recognize, because then when you can be an observer of where you are on the triangle, like let's say you feel like you're in victim mode. When you understand that that is a story you're telling yourself that's actually not true, and that you can actually change the story and get yourself off the triangle, and that you have choice, all of a sudden feel this sense of relief and peace and power and hopefulness that you didn't have before, because you recognize that the story you were telling yourself kept you in victim mentality.
Tell me a little bit more about the role of the persecutor, because I'm thinking of this in terms of people that are working within environmental sustainability, whether they have founded a nonprofit organization, whether they do grassroots work, if they're an activist out there holding a sign, going to like a climate march, or getting their neighbors to sign a petition to get something signed into law. I'm trying to figure out what these roles look like when it comes to I don't want to say the fight against climate change, because we never want to be, come at it from towards and away motivation, right? So the victim mentality when it comes to this specific topic, I think would be, well, the world is screwed anyway. What are the changes, the small changes that I can make? What can that possibly do to save the world? Who cares about, what's going to happen 30 years from now? We might not even be here 30 years from now. And the rescuer mentality might look like, I don't know. Put this in perspective for those within the sustainable mind community. What does that look like for us?
Well, let me back off the triangle for a second. And because one of the things that, I mean, I'll come back on it, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this whole emotional sustainability piece is that when we use the situation, let's say at hand, to feel victimized, to feel the earth is victimized, and then we get angry about it. And then we assume that everybody else feels the same way. And then we get angry about it. And then because they're not acting the same way we are. And then the persecutor role would be to come at them and yell at them and blame them, assuming that they understand things the same way we do, or they feel the same way we do, or they should feel the same way we do, which is going to cause conflict in any relationship. If we want change to happen, we have to be the change first in all ways. And if we're wanting to make change, then conversations have to happen not at the level of emotional upheaval and trauma and being triggered, because I think there's a lot of assuming that goes on in the world in every aspect, not just environmentalism, of course, but in every relationship. People think that if I look at something, it's actually why I got into astrology, because I used to think when I was younger, I would like witness a situation and look around and wonder why everyone else wasn't horrified at the same situation. And then I would just think they were stupid. And at some point I said, they can't all just be stupid. But there has to be something else to this, right? There has to be another reason why I'm looking at this and I have pain, and they're looking at this and seemingly nothing's happening.
Right.
So I started to dive into astrology to learn how people look at the world. and how they interpret information differently, how the different elements interpret information, the different planetary positions interpret information differently. And that's just one aspect. So when we layer on top of this that not everyone interprets the same situation in the same way, when we want to make change, so I'm gluten free, and you know that, and I've been gluten free since 2008. Now, yes, they're to me, they are spraying our fields with pesticides. They have genetically modified and crossbred them with things like pesticides.
Mm.
So it has been changed so much that it's unhealthy for most of us. There's no benefit to eating gluten. Now, I'm not trying to convince everyone on this show to not eat gluten, but just know whether it be the poison that was sprayed on it or the way that the actual genetic chain was reconfigured and modified to withstand the weather so that we'd have more crop. All of these poisons that were added into this, they're not good for us. But I decided rather than yelling at the farmers to stop doing it and the government, because in that case, that's not gonna get me anywhere. What I do is I pay more money for people who are making gluten-free things.
Mhm.
And so since 2008, when there was hardly anything on the market, there is now, I mean, businesses built up around sensitivities and gluten intolerances and products. There's a ton of products everywhere for every dietary choice that you have. And what's happening is that it's because people are using their money and their dollars to vote and to say, this is what I want. I'm willing to pay money for something that I want that is, yes, twice as expensive as what you can buy in the store that's regular, but that's because I care so much about my health. I'm unwilling to take the chance. I don't want it cheaply. I want it in a way that I'm not going to suffer later.
Mm.
So when you take it from the position of what can I do about it? Where can I spend my energy to create change in without having to try to fight big people, big companies with lots of money. And I'm not saying it's not happening, it's happening. In fact, I saw a graph the other day on Instagram where dairy consumption is like way down. And it was a vegan who was sharing it, but she said something like, bye bye dairy industry. And we're not quite there yet, but it's definitely reduced dramatically here in the United States, at least, because people are now, through education, are aware that most of their food is genetically modified or has pesticides or hormones or antibiotics, especially the dairy. And
Mm.
then you eat that and you're, having the results of having all that pesticides, the genetically modified corn that they eat, the hormones they get shot with, and the antibiotics. So, and because most of the dairy farmers are owned by the government now, and we don't like that. But rather than yelling at the government, just search out non-dairy options, support the farmers who are doing organic and aren't attached to the government, and we're doing it sustainably. And the more that we put our money and effort and attention into those, the more we're going to have a shift that doesn't also come with grief and shame and anger and ulcers and sleepless nights and anxiety and feeling victimized, feeling powerless. We have power. How we choose to use it is going to determine how we feel in the process of bringing about change.
Absolutely. And I am a big proponent of voting with your dollar. Absolutely, absolutely. Support the people that are doing good in this world. And as JJ mentioned, supporting the farmers who are, growing things are organic, or, even your local farmers market where they might not have the money to get certified organic, but you can actually talk to the farmer right there and ask them what their practices are on their particular land. So, um, definitely support, food is something that we all need, we all have to eat, and we are what we eat. So you guys don't need to, I'm preaching to the choir here. But coming from a position of emotionally sustainable for just who we are as people and how we walk about the world, what are some suggestions that you can give sustainable minds out there who are looking to become more the change that they want to see in the world, not focusing necessarily on the environment, how we're interacting with everyone kind of out there, but looking within, who we are as people, what we believe in. Give us some actions that we can take on a daily basis to step into a more empowered position.
Well, again, it starts with our belief system and what it is you believe about life, what you believe about your higher power if you have one. And again, sort of like I said before, on a physics level, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So what happens to it? Well, in my opinion and knowing, it gets recycled. And this isn't our first time here. So if we can take a step back and let's say you just don't believe that at all, you think this is the only time we're here and that's it. And that's fine. But just for half a second, because no one can actually say for certain 100% everyone's in agreement that either one of those is true, right?
Yeah.
So if neither one is true, why not try on the idea that there's a greater knowing, there's a greater plan happening that we may not experience in this lifetime, that we're part of it, we help it or hurt it in some ways. But I honestly think it's both, because without contrast, without a problem, we don't create solutions. We weren't going to have the change that's coming without the problem that we've had. More and more in business, in conversations, we're getting mindful, we're getting spiritual. We're talking about law of attraction in terms of physics. We are looking at sustainability on all aspects. Every aspect of life I see is moving more and more into this realm of consciousness where it wasn't before. And I think it's because it's fueled by some of the problems we think we have. So I'd invite people to, instead of thinking that we are horrible people that are hurting the planet all the time, because remember, the planet's been here long before we were, and it'll be here long after we are. And maybe you don't believe that, and that's fine. And that's cool. I just invite you to take a look at that for a second, though. If you really believe like it's going to blow up in the next 30 years.
And some people do.
And okay, so you think it's going to blow up, and maybe you have proof, you've studied, you're in alignment with studies or people who are saying that. Just for a half a second, if you live in that energy, I know for me, like thinking about that upsets me greatly. It puts me in constant state of adrenal fatigue, of fight or flight. It worries me about every little thing I do. And I can't even imagine being happy ever. I can't imagine ever feeling safe. I can't imagine feeling peace. I can't imagine feeling joy. I can't imagine trusting a God or a higher power in that situation. So if that's you and that's your choice, power to you. If you're flexible to try on something different for a minute, consider again that we all thought the world was going to end in 2000 or the Mayan calendar. Didn't the Mayan calendar say 2012 or 2000? I don't know. One of these years, 2012, I think it was.
Every few years, someone comes up with some date and we're all waiting around, and I'm just like, I'll just grab some popcorn. And, if it's going to happen, then it's going to be a spectacular show. That was the joke that I used to make in high school back when I was a jaded teenager. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm just saying if somebody is unhappy or has lots of anxiety and depression and fear and worry, and you look at, well, why do I have that? Here's where the emotional sustainability comes in. You've created a framework and a belief from which you've given your power away. There's no trust in any higher power. There can't be. How can you trust something greater than you and think that you're completely responsible for every single thing that happens in life, right?
Yeah.
So it's that balance of, what do we do about it? Well, if you can take for a second and try on, how is life unfolding for me instead of, because of me or because of the other person? How is it working out? What can I do about it? What are the things I can influence? Because when people show up in positive, hopeful, full of love, unconditional love ways, it just emanates such a peace around other people that you actually bring out of them. Let's move to law of attraction for a second. On a physics level, a frequency and vibration, when more people stubbornly hold the position that life is working out for me and that we're full of joy, love, and abundance, and refuse to allow in a lower frequency, we literally create a space where people have to either step up or step away. And the more people that can actually sustain that and decide that, okay, yes, things happen and we're going to deal with it and we're going to make change and we want change. And how do we make change in a way that actually works? How do we become part of that step 3 process to get into alignment with that which we seek, which means we have to be it. So if we want more compassion, if we want more peace, if we want more cooperation, we have to be the ones giving it. And there's a whole line of teachings that I do at events, that I do on my show. Marjorie knows it very well. It's nonviolent communication work, which I'm going to be taking into another level in the next year. And it's really the nonviolent communication movement created by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who has since passed, literally, like, this communication style has ended wars.
Hmm.
Because when we get down to what people actually feel and what their needs are, a lot of the times we're not talking about the same thing, but we create a war or a problem that comes out of us assuming that everybody else thinks they know what we're talking about.
Right.
Like, let's take the abortion conversation for a second. I'm not going to go down this path, but just know that the two sides are not fighting for the same thing.
Hmm.
The side that's pro-choice is fighting for a woman's right to choose. And the side that's fighting for pro-life is fighting for a not born human to not be euthanized. Okay, so those are two separate conversations, because but we're fighting as if we're talking about the same thing. And case by case, I remember a story in Nonviolent Communication, the book, and in the CD series, where Dr. Marshall Rosenberg was telling a story about a woman who had taken the course and who had learned the work, and a man was trying to rape her. And he was on top of her, and she at first was probably screaming or crying or, yelling, doing what normal people would do. And then as it continued, she took a step back in her mind, and she noticed how angry he looked and how afraid he looked. And she started asking him questions like, and I don't remember verbatim, but it was something in the realm of like, are you must be feeling really angry and really afraid right now, to be doing something like this. And she just literally asked questions about how he was feeling, and reflected back to him the deeper need that he had to feel powerful, to feel seen and heard, to feel empowered. And he stopped.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is this emotional sustainability, the reason why I'm on this path to sort of recreate this work in a different way for sort of our new era, is because it has the power to do that. It has the power to, when we actually understand what our own feelings and needs are, and when
Hmm.
we understand that we can get our needs met most of the time without anyone else having to be different, when we can do that and all of us come from that place, everybody can leave each other alone and not blame each other for how we feel, and all of these misunderstandings and the reasons why we get so upset and the stories we tell ourselves about how someone has control over us. When we can stop those things, we heal people, we stop wars, we make change, we have conversations about making change in a different way, we get people's needs met, we can be creative in the ways that we problem solve things so that everybody wins.
Yeah.
Because I believe that at the end of the day, if we're having an argument about something, it's a misunderstanding. That not if someone understood something in a different way and really understood what their personal need was and why they're fighting so hard against some idea that someone's trying to force them to do. Again, I have a very strong belief that we're just talking about different things. Someone doesn't feel safe, and the story they're telling themselves is everything has to stay the same in order for me to feel safe, but we can find another way for them to feel safe, then they're more open to make change. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. And when it comes to the environmental conversation, because I love the nonviolent communication exercise at your events. And I've been to 3, 4 at this point. And anyone who is resonating with what JJ is saying, please check out Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. That is JJ's most popular podcast. She's got like a gazillion of them. I mean, literally like 9 of them. But if this particular conversation resonates with you, I invite you to take a look at Spirit, Purpose, and Energy podcast. It's amazing. And even more time, I've actually spent more time at your events than I have spent listening to your episodes, although I do go on binges about every month or so. I listen to 5 or 6 or 7 in a row and enjoy them immensely. What do you have to share with people in terms of how they can get involved with this work that you're doing? Because I think bringing this conversation into the larger global environmental conversation about how we can, I don't want to say save this planet, because that's actually a bunch of BS. We're saving ourselves and we're saving the other species that share this planet with us. Like you said, this planet has been around a long time, and it's going to be around a long time after we're gone. What can we get involved with that you have to offer us if this is something that we strongly identify with and this is work that we want to get more involved with?
Well, right now, the best place to find more information, again, that's all very empowering would be, like you said, Spirit, Purpose, and Energy podcast. If anyone's feeling the need to work on themselves a little bit more deeply and get some more information on that, I have a coaching session, starter 2-pack. So if you want information on the starter 2-session package that I do, it's coaching. And from there, I can prescribe other things for you to do, read, depending on what it is that you want. You can go to asustainablemind.com/JJ, and you'll get that deal from Marjorie that I offer to her community. Besides Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, and my coaching package, there's some free gifts, but they're not necessarily in this realm. What I'm about in 2020 is really taking this work to this level. And I've been teaching it now for, I've threatened to rewrite the book. And then I thought, oh, I don't need to write their book. And then I thought about becoming one of their trainers. And then I kind of thought about, but I don't like the way they teach it. I brought people together and I watched all of these friends and family learn. And then they didn't get it like I got it. And I thought, oh, it's in that moment I realized my brain rearranges things the way that I understand them best. And then I have this like epiphany, like, that's amazing. And then I tell other people, and then I watch them again, not receive it the same way. I'm like, oh, okay. This is how I would teach it differently. This is how I would do it differently, because there is still a belief in some of the nonviolent communication that gives a little bit more power away than I'm comfortable with. I believe that if we can see it in ourselves, it makes it easier to see in someone else. And what nonviolent communication work wants you to do is to be able to, like that woman who was being raped, to be able to put yourself in his position. Now, you have to be a pretty resilient, I think, healed person in that moment to be able to bring up enough of peace and calm within yourself to not be defending yourself, right? To get out of that part of your brain that wants to just be in survival, to be able to click in to him and to be able to get out of that situation. So I believe there's a power and a strength that we all individually need for our own lives before we're able to really be empowering deliverers of this information and of this concept. Because I know a lot of people who, if they're supposed to feel your feelings and wonder what your needs are and reflect that back to you, and you're in all way triggered, you're going to feel resentful. Well, why do I got to do that for you? Why can't you do that for me? So
Yes,
I believe it.
absolutely.
I think that's why, to me, the sustainable conversation of emotions is critical. If we are not self-sustaining emotionally, if we do not know how to get our own needs met, if we do not know how to stop blaming others for our situation, then we're forever going to be in crisis and conflict. And I think that nobody wants that. People want answers. But again, it's not taught in schools. It's not common language. It's not common knowledge. It is very currently it's in our paradigm to blame others all the time. But does that ever get us anywhere? I don't think it does.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And again, I want people to check out Spirit, Purpose, and Energy if this conversation resonates with you. And even if you're not quite sure, you think that this might be a little much, that might make you a little bit uncomfortable, check it out anyways, because JJ really does get into some very, very practical tips, things that you can bring into your life on a day-to-day basis to help improve your self-esteem, help improve your communication with others, help bring joy and more peace into your life. It's definitely something that we all can benefit from. And go to asustainablemind.com/JJ to check out that great deal that she's offering for the coaching sessions. So I want to get into our 7 sustainable questions right now, which is how I end every show. And I know, JJ, I did not send you these ahead of time, but I'm sure that you're going to have great answers, because I think I know what you would answer to most of these. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say to our community. Can you share one long-standing habit that you believe has significantly improved your life?
Asking why of myself. I have always asked, why do I feel that way? Why did I interpret it that way? Why did I react that way? So I've always been curious of my own reaction and feelings to pretty much any situation for as long as I can remember.
And what is one new habit that you're cultivating in your life right now?
I would say a new habit for me is to really honor my work-life balance. And I have done it over time, but I've transitioned in relationships. And I now have the opportunity to kind of have me time and meditation time and exercise time with my partner. But then also because we're both entrepreneurs, I work longer. Like I work more, and I have less time for things I love doing, like cooking. I can't garden anymore because we've moved until we move again. And I used to love being outside and picking my own herbs and vegetables and making home cooked meals, which I still do, but I do it less. So something that I'm cultivating more, because now that life has shifted, so have my habits, is to really honoring and putting in my schedule. Like I literally for next week put in a nap. Like I outlined the
Yeah,
time that I'm going to take a nap, because I'm literally working from 6:30 in the morning until 7:30 at night. And it's not constant and there are breaks, but if I don't rest and recuperate and spend a little time on myself, I will again be in adrenal fatigue, or I'll be, agitated, or I'll be depleted. And it doesn't have to be like that. And I want to make sure I honor my own energy field and my own energy needs.
absolutely. Whose work do you admire? I know that you talked earlier about the Cartman drama triangle or victim triangle. Whose work do you admire in this field of work that you do?
Well, the first person that comes to mind who's not been on the show yet is Dr. Christian Northrup. She was the first physician who is a gynecologist who I saw talk about alternative things. She, through her practices, also was doing functional medicine, which I'm 100% behind. I am not a big proponent of Western medicine. I am 100% behind functional medicine, which is different in that we are not fighting against an old paradigm of diagnose and treat with a drug or with surgery. Functional medicine continues to evolve and look at the whole body and look at the whole environment, and will use food and homeopathic stuff and emotional management as tools to help the body heal. So I love functional medicine, and she's one of the first that I saw use that. Not only does she do that, she does goddess retreats. She talks about astrology. She does law of attraction. She knows about nonviolent communication. So I really feel so connected to her. She's doing all the things that I believe in and that I support and that I think are a well-rounded approach to health and to life. So definitely, but she is coming on the show, but she hasn't been on yet. Dr. Evan Alexander's been on the show. He wrote Proof of Heaven, and I really admire him. Dr. Cherie Carter Scott is a legend of mine. Her first book changed my life, and so she's recently been on the show, and she'll be on again. So the work of the three of those people, I've just been. Oh, and Harville
Yes.
Hendricks, who created imagotherapy. I'm a huge fan. Went to his workshop, have his books, had him on the show twice. I also use his practices in my coaching. So I
Hmm.
work with people on some of these concepts of imagotherapy and relationship therapy, and even using his tools individually. Like when I did that imago exercise for the very first time in therapy with another person, I came out of there thinking, why the heck doesn't every single person in therapy start here? Not relationship therapy, individual therapy, because it's literally a fast track for understanding your core wounds and how they show up in your life right now. It's powerful work. So I would say those 4 or 5 people are definitely on the top level for me.
And I don't want to answer this next question for you. The question is, do you have an internet resource that you find helpful on a regular basis? But I'm going to say, actually, the work that you're talking about, actually, the Imago therapy, I have workbooks, and also nonviolent communication. I have this the feelings and needs chart, which of course it deserves a lot more an explanation before it's actually used, but just to look into the Center for Nonviolent Communication in general, I think is a wonderful online resource. Do you have any other internet resources that you would suggest to people that are interested in learning more about these topics?
Well, me.
Yes.
If you email me, jj@jjflizanes.com, that's JJFLIZANES. If you email me and tell me what you're looking for, I can better direct you. I have the needs and feelings list that Marjorie is referring to. I'm the one that gave it to her, but I also have a podcast episode that I've done on it. It's
Yes.
episode 118 of the Fit to Love podcast, but it's a more recent podcast that I've redone on another show for like archived episodes.
Hmm.
Anyway, but I can send you the link to the podcast. You can go find it. It's called Three Steps to Effective Communication, episode 118 on the Fit to Love podcast. It's a blue icon. And then if you go to fittolove.tv, that's my Fit to Love website, fit with the number 2, love.tv, and you can download the worksheet. However, if you just email me, I'll send it to you and it's faster.
Cool. And I will have literally every single thing that JJ has mentioned so far in the show notes for this episode, including her email address and links to these podcasts that she's been mentioning. What book would you recommend to sustainable minds out there that are hoping to shift their mindset to become the change that they want to see in the world?
If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules by Dr. Sheree Carter Scott. That's number one. If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules. Dr. Sheree Carter Scott. The next book I would recommend is what we've been talking about, The Nonviolent Communication, but I would actually recommend it on audio.
Okay. That's a good tip. I've not listened to it. Okay. So as you all can see, JJ is absolutely a wealth of information. And like I said at the beginning, taking care of myself in terms of self-care, in terms of emotional sustainability, meditating, which is something that I've really grown a lot in just these last few months. It's really helped me kind of get a hold on where my life is currently as I'm expanding very quickly, both in my business and my personal life. She's an amazing coach. So definitely check JJ out at jjflizanes.com. And of course, all of these resources, links, books, all of that will be accessible in the show notes for this episode. JJ, do you have any final words or parting pieces of guidance to give sustainable minds out there?
Well, if you really believe that you can be the change you want to see in the world, then the good news is the only person you have to start with is you. And if you're noticing in your life that you're attracting things you don't want or circumstances and situations that aren't pleasing to you, then there's a lot of work that we can do. And I don't mean with me, I just mean in general. And so I know and believe, I know because of my own life and my own life path and what I've been able to attract and manifest and shift and heal and change, that actually does work. That when you become what it is you want to see, you inspire others around you to step up and do the same. And I offer a free 30-day manifestation challenge a couple times a year for free. I think the next free one's not till April, but you can go ahead and check it out at jjflizanes.com if it interests you. But I would recommend listening to Spirit, Purpose, and Energy first, just to see if you like the vibe and the teachings and me, of course, because I don't want you to join if you don't like me, because I'm the one running it. And that's okay. You don't have to love me or even like me. But if you are attracted to what I'm talking about and you want to be held accountable to practice, out to be at a frequency of freedom and love and joy and compassion more, and you need accountability to do that so you don't get sucked into the drama of the news and of the conversation at hand around all of us, which again is necessary. It's necessary to bring about what it is we want to change, but that's not the frequency at which change happens. Mm-hmm. That the frequency of the problem is a lower frequency than the solution, which is a higher, better feeling place, which leads us into action, inspired action, and inspires others around us to join us. So I would say come over to jjflizanes.com and see if there's a free gift. I have a bunch of them that resonates with you. And remember that to be the change you want to see in the world, it all starts inside. It's an inside job. And there are plenty of tools, resources, and support for you to be the best you, to make the biggest difference, both for you, your family, and the planet. And that you can do it joyfully, successfully, abundantly, and in a supportive community.
Thank you so much for joining us today, JJ.
Thanks for having me, Marjorie.
I'm Marjorie Alexander, and I'm the host of A Sustainable Mind podcast, where I interview environmental change makers around the world.
Marjorie, what inspired you to start your show?
Other than I needed a thesis project for my master's degree, really what inspired me to start this podcast was that I was an avid podcast listener, and there were very, very, very few shows that were environmentally related. And all of the shows that were out there were either not being recorded yet, they had really poor production quality, and so they just were not easy to listen to, or they were news focused and came from basically a doom and gloom perspective. And I did not find that was very helpful for me, and that was not very constructive to the change that I want to see in the world.
So I invite everyone to go check out A Sustainable Mind podcast by Marjorie Alexander. And if you want to check out more about Marjorie, go to asustainablemind.com to learn more about her mission and her podcast, and check it out.